大家好. So now let's talk about Aquarius. Aquarius rules the shanks. So the shank is the part of your leg that goes from the bottom of your knee to your ankle. The shanks are actually an intermediary between your thighs and your feet, right? They connect the power that comes from your thighs with the feet that provides stability. The shanks are the part of the body that we are usually the least aware of. It's the least commonly thought about body part, right? The only time that we think about our shanks is when, we hit them against, a table, or someone kicks us, in our shin or something like that. Otherwise, we usually don't think about that body part. Of course, if you want to dress up, if you, want to be sexy, and, then you will find a way to make them look beautiful and attractive. But apart from that, the shanks are usually that body part that has sort of the least important function, right? All the other body parts, if you think about it, they are, they're very important in so many ways. But when we use our body sort of in a normal way, then the shanks have really the least significant function. We just don't even think about it. It's sort of an intermediary between the thighs and the feet, okay? When we walk, we pay attention to our feet, right, where we step. We might also pay attention to our thighs. When we walk for too long, we need a break because our thighs, they start hurting. But the shanks is really something we usually don't pay attention to. So now, what do they represent? There are parts of ourselves that we don't need to pay much attention to, and those are represented by Aquarius, right? The shanks are the part of the body that is just meant to be ignored, okay? That's why Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Many times we make our life so complicated and take life so serious. But Saturn actually gives us the ability to, be simple in our heart and learn to tolerate, the negative aspects of our life, right? And it's so easy, for us to be miserable, right? We want something, but we don't get it. Then if we get it, we want more. And so the ego is just sort of never satisfied. And it's Aquarius that really urges us not to dwell too much, on the past and all the things that went wrong, and not also constantly dream about, how the future could be better, right? Because over-identification with the mind just creates a lot of stress in our life, right? So there's a way to be happy in this world, and that's when we learn to just accept ourselves for who we are and to be at peace with ourselves, right? Otherwise, if we get too much caught up with all the ifs and whys and right, then we will just be burdened, our whole life, with all, with all these, thoughts and all the things that went wrong, right? So Aquarius is, helping us, to not pay attention to the things that we don't need to pay attention, right? Just learn to be present with yourself, accept yourself for who you are, learn to appreciate life as it is, and then you can also appreciate the people in your life, right? And if we can develop this sort of a healthy relationship with ourselves, then we can also develop a healthy relationship with the people in our life. And then all the drama is over, right? And we can do all these amazing things together, right? Now, all relationships are works in progress, right? Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is all about, hard work, perseverance, and it is normal that, we get into situations where, we sometimes feel the pain in our shin, right? Because, either we lash out on another person or maybe someone kicks us in the shin, symbolically speaking, right? But, we need to understand that, those are really the times where we can actually make great improvement, right? Because we know what, doesn't work, right? And then we can change it, we can improve it, right? If you don't like something in your life, change it, okay? But until we come to that point of really accepting ourselves fully, as we are, we might try so many things that we want to change, and we will realize that it really won't make a significant difference, okay? Because as long as we identify with the ego is always separative, right? There's always you, and then there's the other person. The ego likes to divide people, right? Whereas the true self creates union and harmony, right? And so many times we need to first, go through some periods of, screaming and biting and perhaps even separating before we really get tired of all this egocentric behavior. And then we can sit down like adults and talk in a calm, mature, and truthful way how we can be friends and truly love each other, right? So Aquarius, through the Shanks is really teaching us that many of our old egocentric ideas and beliefs, we better let go of them, right? They haven't ever really done us any good. And we can replace them with those concepts of who we are and life that allow us to actually have loving relationships, to be happy, and to live the best possible life. So there are no planets exalted or debilitated in Aquarius. Healthy planets in Aquarius, such as Venus, that gets the light in Aquarius, will help a person to go through life without paying too much attention to all these painful aspects of their life, right? Right? A person thinks that, I can do all these wonderful things, I have these nice interaction with the people I love, why bother with all the negative stuff, right? I don't want to act like this anymore, I want to be happy, and therefore I'm going to, make a decision that, I will only, act in these kind of ways, and I will be this kind of person, and I will, go about my life in this way. But if there are afflicted planets in Aquarius, right, then a person is sort of always looking, what's wrong with them, right? They're gonna be focusing on, what they don't like about their life, okay? And then they get too absorbed in all their psychological complexes, right? The sun gets starved in Aquarius. And in order for the Aquarius sun person to develop their self-confidence, they really need to deal with their trauma first, okay? They need to learn to accept themselves as they are, with all the good and bad. And then their, innate humanitarian and compassionate spirit can really come out and do a lot of good in the world. So now let's talk about Pisces. Pisces rules the feet. So with the feet, we touch the ground, and they become dirty. Okay, even if you wear shoes, your feet are gonna sweat, unless of course it's too cold, but under normal temperature, there will be sweat when you walk with your shoes, right? And the sweat is a nutrient for bacteria, and it's actually the bacteria that gives a bad smell. And sometimes wearing shoes can actually also lead to fungal infections as well. So Pisces is the dirty sign, right? Pisces is the part of us that gets dirty when we, as we, go through our life, okay? no matter who we are, as we live our life, we are going to do things that we won't feel good about. Okay? It's impossible to live in this world and not do wrong things, right? And everyone in this world is sort of gonna do something dirty, okay? Luckily, Pisces also gives us the ability to free ourselves from that pain actually that comes from knowing that we have done something wrong, right? With the feet are actually what we use obviously to stand, right? And the feet symbolize the foundation in our life. And Pisces is actually what rules, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, right? And Jupiter gives the wisdom through Pisces to understand who we are and to be forgiving and compassionate to ourselves and the people we are with, right? Now, Venus is the planet that is exalted in Pisces. And Venus is the planet that is actually able to apply all of this, we could say, lofty understanding in the real world. Venus knows how to navigate through life more than any other planet. Right? Jupiter is sort of the spiritual preceptor, but Venus is we could say, the practical advisor, right? Who knows how, all these, spiritual concepts can be applied in real life, okay? Because we are gonna walk down the road of our life and we will encounter unpleasant situations. But Venus in Pisces is so important because Venus can help us navigate through those situations so that we always make the most out of them. And every step that we take, we are able to just be more fulfilled and successful in life, okay? Remember that Venus through Libra can make everything worthwhile. There's always a reason why a situation is best for us and why it is very actually important that we are in this situation, and it is Venus in Pisces that really gives us that wisdom. Now, how does Venus do that? Well, Venus gives us forgiveness that leads to greater self-love, okay? I can see that every situation I'm in helps me to make more peace with my life. Right? My experiences help me to let go of, the fears that I have, the problems that I encounter. And now, because of, what I have learned, I can love myself so much more and be happier with myself and with my life, right? And in this way, Venus in Pisces is able to always make sort of the best decision that lead to a better life. Now, the planet that is debilitated in Pisces is Mercury, right? So Mercury represents the rules and regulations from your guru or from your society, right? And when Venus is debilitated, a person tends to follow the rules that actually don't apply to their circumstances, right? It is like a judge that follows the law indiscriminately, right? Or it is a corrupt judge that doesn't care about the law and makes up his own laws, right? Both of them are really unhealthy extremes that really don't help us in our life for the long term to actually have a really balanced and fulfilling life, right? Because a judge knows the law and then he applies them to time, place, and circumstances in a spirit of compassion, right? This is, the best judge, right? And that's why Mercury also rules the sign of Virgo, which is, as we remember, the intestinal part of the body. And this is also the sign of the law, because a judge is really meant to find the right law that actually applies to the person and ignore the wrong ones, right? If a judge takes every law that was ever written about a crime, then, we're going to be at the mercy of the law, and we're going to feel unfairly treated, right? But if he has the intelligence to say, hey, these are the laws that are best for this person to be used, right? And I'm also going to ignore these other laws, then he will make a good judgment. And that is really what Mercury in Pisces needs to develop. They need to really base their compassion on laws that actually work to improve a person's life. Okay? When Mercury is debilitated, the rules and laws, the things that the Guru tells you to do, or the ways that you think that you should live your life and manage your life, they're just not going to work, right? Compassion really becomes an empty thing because it doesn't bring about, tangible, real improvements in a person's life, right? The person might fantasize about how the world should be, and then, get really sentimental about it. But in the end, it doesn't, at the end, it just remains sentiment that doesn't really benefit a person practically, okay? So, coming back to Pisces. Pisces is really about experiencing the freedom from, the shadow of the pain of the bad things that happen to us, that we somehow to carry along with us, and therefore become peaceful and happy, right? Through Pisces, we basically learn to walk in this world, but not be of this world, right? And therefore Pisces ultimately allows us to create more and more and more solid foundations in our life, okay? And when Venus is in Pisces, then we have really that ability and the gracefulness of Venus to walk down the road of our life barefoot without getting hurt, right? If you ever walk barefoot, then you really realize, what your feet can actually do, right? Usually we just put shoes on, and we could compare this here as Mercury debilitated. I'm just going to put on this big, heavy boots and not really care and trample on anything, right? Because we shoe thing, when we have shoes on, we don't have to think about anything, right? We can just be totally careless the way that we walk around, right? But hey, if you do this in a forest, let's say, and all of a sudden, your boot might get tangled up with, the branch of a tree, and you just fall over and break your nose, okay? And so that's what it's like, walking with boots, really, you go and, you walk barefoot and you learn that this trail is actually dirty, right? There are actually sharp things on the ground, painful things that could potentially break my toes, or when I fall over, I might hurt myself somehow, okay? But you can actually realize that all these things are there, and then what is actually happening is once you acknowledge them, then you can actually sort of let go of them. You can avoid them, right? And so you're actually safer without the boots because you sort of develop that grace of Venus to really land on a rock, let's say, that allows you to stand on it, that is flat, and go from that type of rock to another rock or to another place that actually allows you to, put your foot on, and that is very soft, okay? And so your foot basically just touches, this one bit of a rock and goes to the next, and you just, go here and there, and your foot doesn't get hurt because you know exactly where you step, right? And so this is ultimately what we need to learn in Pisces. It's this continuous forgiving and loving action of dancing through this minefield, really, of dangerous rocks that allows for our feet, to just land on where they're happy and they don't get hurt, okay? And we have to practice that because we are used to just trampling around unconsciously, right? And then when we get hurt, then we usually blame other people. And of course, that usually just reflects our own resistance, to actually deal with this type of behavior that only causes us pain, okay? Now, Venus in Pisces really allows us, therefore, to get through those most difficult terrains in life, right? Because we can navigate the most tricky situations in life if we simply become conscious of what it is that actually causes us problems, right? In a relationship, there will naturally be problems because the partner is said to be the mirror of who we are, of the good and the bad things, right? So naturally, there will be a lot that needs to be navigated, right? But Venus is the love planet, it's the peacemaker, and it allows us to navigate through those stressful situations in a way so that we can use them to our advantage and be happy and actually become grateful for it, okay? And so any situation really that is dirty, painful, right, and where things go wrong, Venus in Pisces really symbolizes our ability that we can, gracefully navigate through whatever comes in our way without ourselves getting hurt or without another person getting hurt, right? Which is just like walking barefoot, okay? So if you want to experience Venus in Pisces, just learn to walk barefoot, and then you will see, how it is possible that when you're conscious of every step, that, you can actually, learn to dance in life, okay? And if you want to experience Mercury in Pisces, then yes, just, take out your biggest, heaviest pair of boots and just, don't care about, what you're trampling on.